So I grew up in New England. I went to school in McGill University. I studied international development. I did med school at Dartmouth. I started MedLife in 2004-ish. I did emergency medicine at Dartmouth as well. In 2016, I moved down to Lima. I've been based in Lima since 2016 with a little hiatus around COVID. My wife's here, my kids are here. This is what I do, this is my life. So why are we here? Well, why are you guys here? Who's studying something in health? Okay, who's not studying something in health? Cool, what you studying? Nice, very cool. I studied international development. I was not pre-med until my last semester of college. Anybody else? Not pre-med? Cool. What not pre-med? PA. Cool. PA? All like, are you coming from a PA program? Yes. No. Pre-PA. Pre-PA. Okay, cool. And then there was some hands over here. Yeah. Nursing? Cool. Nice. What's that? Pre-dental. Pre-dental. Nice. My wife's a dentist. Very cool, great. So we're kind of going through a different time with MedLife. So for a long, long time, I mean, I kind of said to you, I've been focused on international development. That was my undergrad studies. We'll talk a little bit in this about how MedLife came to be. We're going through a time where we're really thinking a lot about you guys, and this probably because I'm getting a little older. I'm going to be 46 in a few weeks. And so we're thinking about you guys, and we're thinking about like, what does the future of this look like? And that's a little bit what this talk is about. So why do you guys want to do, why are you here?
The difference in healthcare.
Awesome, great. And I suspect that you're not here for a week thinking at the end of this week, I will have made a difference in healthcare and I'm done.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, awesome. So I said to you, I'm 46. I've been doing this now for like 20 some years, right? I started doing work in Latin America. I guess my first trip to Latin America, I was probably like 17, 18, right? And very much like you, I sort of felt like I want to make a difference. I want to use my skills to see if I can try and bridge gaps and do all the good stuff, right? This many years later, it feels like, whew, there's a lot to do still. You know what I mean? Like I've been doing this a long time and I'm not sure that we've made much of a dent. How many of you guys feel like we're winning this battle, if it's a battle? If I can describe it that way. Like, are we winning? So this is a bunch of stats. I won't really bore you. It's basically to say that like low-income minority people are in the United States get worse healthcare than what we would hope, right? So it turns out that Black women get misdiagnosed with heart attacks, that Hispanic people don't get the same healthcare that we would hope they would, and there's all sorts of reasons as to why, right? When you go through med school, you learn about pneumonia and appendicitis and pharmacology and antibiotics and all these things. But I think the reality is like you don't learn a whole lot about how to provide care within that gap, right? So if we know that like somebody has a heart attack and these are the signs and symptoms of heart attack and we know how to diagnose that, why is it that between two groups of people there's a difference? Why does a Hispanic woman maybe have worse healthcare than a white man?
People have certain biases towards specific groups.
They have certain biases towards certain groups. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I am married to a Peruvian woman, right? I go up and I work in Houston, is where I work. So I fly up, I used to do it every month, now I do it every other month. Do you think I walk in with lots of biases? If it's just biases, right? Is it that the entire system is biased? Are there individual people that are biased? Like what is it about bias that's creating the gap?
Also, like, I believe there are individual people who don't have biases, but
yep.
I think as a result of how we have been educated, like you've said, we are not taught, or at least like my classes don't really focus on how to take care of individual people. Like,
right.
It's just like you said, like diagnoses.
Right.
So I think it's mostly just in general.
Yeah. So I like your second answer better than I like your first one, and I'll just tell you why. So bias, I think there's an implication of almost like a desire to do harm or an ignorance that you don't care about. The second answer you said is we don't get trained to do this well. And I think that, in my experience of the last 20 years, is the reality. Is that it's not that Pamplona Alta, where you guys have been working over this last week, or Ventanilla, or wherever you've been, is per se, people are ignoring it. It's that people haven't been trained to try and provide care in that context. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like the minorities don't get cared about.
They don't get cared about.
Yeah,
yep.
I feel like they honestly don't get cared about.
Sure.
why there's so much morality, or what's it called, that there's so much deaths,
Yes.
especially in the Hispanic and Black race. I do believe
Yeah.
that you don't get care about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yeah. I think it would be hard to say anything other than that, right? Like if people are dying, it's hard to say anything other than that, right? Is that it just doesn't feel like we get the same care.
We don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fair feeling and statement. So that was the key question, is like, why isn't this working, right? Like, what is the gap? Like, why in Pamplona Alta, why in Lima, Peru, are we not able to provide the same care that we do in Houston? And within Houston, why are there certain populations that get better care and other people get worse care? And we're starting to kind of play with some of these ideas, right? So what is it to me, right? I'm gonna use this term cultural humility, cultural competency, sort of in this overarching idea, okay? And I think it encompasses a lot of things. So like if I don't speak Spanish, do you think I'm gonna provide really great care to a Hispanic patient? And why is that? Like, why not? Right, because I don't understand what they say. Now let's say I do speak Spanish really well, but I'm from a different country. Are there nuances within language? So within who's from like the Northeast? Okay, cool. Anybody from the South? Cool. Anybody from the West? Are there things among you that you say differently that you wouldn't necessarily understand? Different ways to describe things? Is there a chance that somebody might come in and describe chest pain in a different way in the South that they might maybe in the Northwest? And are those cultural differences, what might they lead to some gap in outcome, right? And then you lay on racial differences, historical differences, economic differences, linguistic differences, and all of a sudden that's just, right? And so when I say cultural competency, I don't just mean understanding culture, okay? I mean understanding language. I mean understanding history. I mean understanding a people, a place, what those people are going through. I'm trying to understand the whole thing. And basically the shortcut to the end of the thing is that's how I've learned, as a guy that grew up in New England that didn't speak Spanish when I was growing up, how I've learned to provide care to people living in this environment, right? And my thesis is that if I can learn to provide care here, I can help you provide care where you are going to go, right? I don't think that Houston is harder to practice medicine in than Pamplona Alta, right? I just don't, because I do both, okay? So the real insight, right, is that this idea of cultural competency, or learning how to provide care to people that are different than our own backgrounds, is a skill that we can learn. It's not just something that I grew up with and I'm like, I don't really care. I think the reality is when I went to med school, I had a whole lot of talks on pharmacology and pneumonia and appendicitis, and I did all these things. I did not have a whole lot of talks on how to provide care to Latin Americans, right? Cultural competency at my med school was like an hour-long lecture that you did and you were out and boom, right? I think my experience is that has a lot to do why we're not good at doing this. Right, and so what are the consequences? Consequences are misdiagnoses, mistrust, disengagement, worse outcomes, feeling like nobody cares, right? Everybody's out to kind of get you. All right. So really can anybody tell me what MedLife's mission is? So MedLife means medicine, education, and development for low-income families everywhere, right? And the medicine, education, development is just what we call a safe home. We include a safe home, sewage, water, a safe home, right? And so we will come back to these three questions real quick. Can we go back to that 1 second? So the questions that I'd like you just to think about, do you know what community you want to serve? Do you have a sense? Yeah.
I want to serve the developmentally disabled and the geriatrics.
Okay, cool.
Because I feel like with the developmentally disabled, they definitely get overlooked and they're hard to work with. So you have to definitely have compassion for their behaviors. Like,
sure.
You can't even look at race or anything, like specifically the behaviors, how they act, and that they're obviously something's wrong with them.
Sure.
I don't know how to say it in a better context.
Yeah.
So you have to have more compassion and empathy.
Great. Yeah. Anybody else? What does that look like? Does anyone want to be a pediatrician? Okay. So you want to serve kids? That's community, right? Yeah. Anybody want to be an OBGYN? You want to take care of women? All right. I'd say that's community, right? Do you have an idea of like where in the country you might want to do that? No, that's okay. Cool. So let's think about that a little bit, kind of where you want to serve people. And I think this is maybe a hard question too, is why? Then what soft skills do you need to do that, right? And then what are the hard skills you need to do that? So how do we come to be MedLife, and what is MedLife? So really, I never did like what I'm going to use as the term is like a medical mission style type of work, okay? I didn't do this. My exposure to this kind of thing initially was going to Costa Rica for 2 weeks to learn Spanish. So I was like 17 years old, I was in like Spanish 5 or whatever, and I went to Costa Rica and did 2 weeks of Spanish. Then I went to McGill and I studied all this stuff. Basically, I started MedLife because I was working at a rural hospital in Ecuador, and I got recruited by a medical mission organization, sort of like what this is, right? To basically translate for physicians. So there was physicians from the United States, they needed a translator. I'm like, sure, I was living in Ecuador anyway, so I went and I translated for these people. The care that I saw was just really lackluster. You know what I mean? So basically, like, it was really well-intentioned people that were coming down, didn't speak the language, didn't understand the culture, didn't understand the referral system that they were working in, handed out some antibiotics, but like at the end of the week, you're kind of like, ugh, like, what's the plan for the follow-up with the kid that had the heart murmur? And everybody's like, I don't know. Right? Like, it just wasn't, it didn't feel robust. Does that make sense? And so I had come out of this world where I was working with Paul Farmer. Anybody know Paul Farmer? I say working with Paul Farmer, that sounds so grandiose. I was working with Partners in Health. Paul Farmer was part of that, okay? Paul Farmer is a doc in Boston who has since passed away, who did really good work. And basically the model that he came up with was that if you hire people from the local community, you can provide complicated work in really underserved settings. So in the kinds of communities where you guys are going, he would treat people for HIV. He would treat people for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is like a 2-year diagnosis treatment plan, okay? Really complicated diseases he treated in these sort of settings. And so part of my thinking was, hey, if we just took that model of this Paul Farmer model and we said, can we do that with this sort of model? Could we provide better care? So did you guys see, and sometimes you don't, Carlos Benavides, Ricardo Casani, any of these people this week? Did anybody, the staff, did they meet anybody? Carlos, Ricardo, any of our med programs team? No? Not necessarily. Okay. So basically, behind the scenes that you guys don't always see, there are people that are from the communities where you guys have been working, okay? And they work with us 365 days a year. So long before you come, they're working with communities, doing educational talks, setting things up, organizing people. Similar to what you guys have done with MedLife staff to plan all this trip, our team is working to do that as well, okay? So, coming back to whoever said I wanted to change myself, right? I think that the reality is a lot of us come down in this work because we think that we're gonna like make a difference. I will tell you, just kind of cut to the chase, the reality is it takes many years to make a difference. And that is a muscle that you grow, not a choice that you make, okay? So it's not something that I say, I'm gonna make a difference this week and I make a difference. You can make a choice to start to learn, but the difference comes with time and the skills that you gain, okay? And this guy, Tom Meredith, basically taught me that. He taught me to look at communities, listen to communities, and understand communities in a much more deep way than I had been accustomed to prior to that. And that was through a program that I participated in Panama City, Panama. And basically we would understand some of these really complicated themes that I think you guys have talked about. The deep listening stuff. You've had talks about that this week, yes? So some of that kind of thinking was a lot of, that came through Tom Meredith to me, okay? If you wanna understand MedLife, it's basically these two guys put together in a sandwich, okay? So it's Paul Farmer's model of like hiring people from communities to do really good work over the long term, and then learning how to listen to communities really carefully and trying to do really great work by combining those two things. What did you guys understand of that this week? What does it mean to listen to things that are unsaid in this context? It's okay.
Oh.
It's okay. So I'll repeat what you said. Is basically you said that through working with the dentist and seeing the quality or the nature of their dentition, right? You could understand their eating habits, their dental hygiene, their education around that, their access to toothpaste, toothbrushes, maybe even just a dentist. Like seeing those problems, you understand certain things without actually talking to somebody.
Even how the little girl we saw today was so scared of being like in that scenery.
Sure.
It goes to show that she's never
Been
had
there.
that experience before.
Right. Yes. So fear can really tell you a lot about something without being explicitly stated. Yeah. What about the reality tour? Anything that you took away? I'm getting nodding heads. What did you take away?
Like without even needing to tell anybody, like talk to anybody from the community, you can already tell how different the conditions are here and like compared to where we're from.
Yeah.
And just like seeing the kids playing in the dirt and everything, like it's like you see the community still like living and like kids still playing and everything, but it's just in such a different context.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. What about like things about water? Can you take anything about that? Like GI illnesses, diarrheal illnesses? Yeah.
Something that I felt was very impactful from this week so far is seeing how in America we have access to running water to our houses, that it's filtered. Especially in New York, we have very good water.
Sure.
Where you could drink from the tap, say.
Yep.
But here we see that most houses in those underdeveloped areas, they don't have running water to their houses. There's one tank that you have to walk however far to go and get, and you can only use, say, for the week. You have
Right.
that one however much. And you know, we value so much like cold water and ice and having water bottles, but you know, people here, they don't have that luxury, and it's very important to gain that perspective.
Great. Great. So let's say you're an ER doctor working in an ER and a little kid comes in with a diarrheal illness. Did the reality tour help you understand that in any way? Okay. Do you think in med school you get much exposure to that? Yeah. Do you understand the point here? Okay. When you start to understand people at a deeper level, their communities, their access to simple things like water, a home, right? Seeing a dentist, the fear a little kid has in seeing a dentist, all of a sudden you understand they've never actually seen a dentist before, right? These little kinds of ways of communicating with people, you can start to understand things that have nothing to do with appendicitis, right? But it turns out have a lot to do with not missing the diagnosis and really understanding people and getting to the right diagnosis, right? So if somebody's coming with a place that has really clean tap water, and a little kid comes in with diarrheal illness, do you think it's a bacterial diarrhea or a viral diarrhea in New York? Probably. Probably it's a viral diarrhea. If a little baby comes from Pamplona Alta and they're drinking out of a jug of water that's been sitting there for the last 13 days in the hot sun, do you think that there's a higher risk that that's a bacterial requiring antibiotics? Does that make a difference in providing good care? Okay. Did the patient tell us that? Not necessarily. Did our understanding through deep listening and understanding a community inform us how to make the right diagnosis? Okay, do you see where there's value in this? Okay. Okay, let's keep going. So we can talk about this. This is really kind of the value that we think about trying to provide communities, and also you guys, I think that and maybe you don't even think about this. Do you think about the value that you get out of this? Is that something you're doing right now, or do you mostly think about like, I needed 40 hours to get to med school? It's okay. This is not our first rodeo, like, right? We know you need service hours. What are you thinking that you are getting out of this? Or are you mostly thinking that this is about service to other people? Good.
I feel like we definitely have value, because if we didn't have value, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think for me, the value that you guys get from coming here starts from starting to understand this work, right? It's not really in necessarily the value you provide patients, right? It's not that we're not trying to get you to become like doctors here, right? It's really in understanding this work so that you can then go on and do this, right? And then figuring out over time how you can do the kind of work that Peru does, but in a community where you guys want to work. Make sense? Can we keep going, Rosie? Okay, so we talked about MedLife's mission, right, which is basically to provide these services to low-income communities everywhere. The reality is that we have no intention to work in Chicago. Like, that is not gonna happen. Like, other than me, we're not looking to work in Houston, okay? So if we say in our mission statement that we wanna provide care to families everywhere, how are we gonna do that? So like, to us, to me, the value that you have in being here is not about the money that you paid, okay? It's not about the work that you did. It's not about the cement that you carried, right? It's about the lessons that you're learning. And so that when you're where I am today, you can pay that forward to a group of people just like you, and we continue to do this work better, right? Because I think having gone through med school and residency and blah, 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 I think the reality is we don't get a lot of training on this, right? And I think the real problem with this is that if more of us were to get trained in how to do it well, and we could talk about that in terms of the community side, I think we could all do it a lot better. So basically, MedLife's in the process of training, and we would love your feedback, okay? So we're just working on changing our mission statement. This is like 20 years into this, right? And being just a little bit more explicit. Obviously, we've been doing talks like this since we started, right? The first trip we ever did was 6 kids, and we were talking like this, right? So we've been doing this forever, but we didn't really recognize it in the way that we want to now. And so really what we're saying is we're gonna do this, providing medicine, education, and safe housing to low-income families by training and accompanying people to serve ethically, act sustainably, understand systems deeply, and walk alongside communities for the long haul. We develop both local in Lima, Peru, and global students into lifelong practitioners to service capable of creating generational change, right? So that's kind of where we're aiming at and trying to really focus on how we can help you guys be successful, okay? Let's continue with that. So this is Bo. Bo is currently in residency in pediatrics and pediatric psychiatry. He was a student at the University of Illinois, much like yourselves, wanted to go to med school. How many of you want to go to med school, and maybe is anybody applying to med school, PA school, NP school now? You're applying. Are you writing your essay?
Like I'm taking an MCAT and
Okay, cool. So like in your essay, I'm guessing you're gonna write something around the lines of like, I wanna help people? Fair? Yes? Yes, okay. Do you think every other kid that's applying to med school, NP school, and PA school is also going to say, I want to help people? Do you think that that school is gonna be impressed by that statement? No, they will not, right? And so what part of what this is about is when Bo started, he was just like everybody else, just like me too, and we just said, I wanna help people. And so when he started to write his essay, he had been involved with MedLife for a long time. He's like, Nick, would you mind, he was, you know, a leader in MedLife, and he said, Nick, would you mind looking at my essay? I'm like, sure. And he basically was like, I wanna help people. I'm like, dude, like, I'm not sure that that's gonna get you across the line. And I said, you really gotta focus on like your why. Like, why do you need to go to med school? Like, why is this so important? Like, there's lots of people that want this seat. Why should they give it to you, right? And what he said is, well, through working with MedLife, I really realized that I'm passionate about women's health and children's health. And so after my first SLT or 2, I went home and I worked at a women's clinic, you know, doing domestic violence stuff, and then I followed this pediatrician, and then I followed this OBGYN, and all of a sudden you started to see that there was this arc that was going through his 4 years that had to do with children's and women's health. And when he started to really articulate that, all of a sudden he could tap into like a why that he was really passionate about, right? Something that he was willing to, I think the easiest way that I have to understand that is something that you're willing to suffer for, okay? Med school is not fun, residency is not fun. It's hard, okay? And so the question is, if you just wanna help people, there's easier ways to help people. Trust me, like there's way easier ways to help people. If you really wanna help people in that way, you gotta be willing to go through the fire, right? And in the moment of going through the fire, you better have a good reason to lean on, because otherwise you're gonna wanna quit, right? And so having clarity of your why now, one, is gonna help you get in, one, but two, the more you have clarity, the more your path becomes clear, and when stuff gets really hard, you remember that why. Does that make sense? Okay, so that was Bo's story. So we're gonna kind of come back to this. So what is our goal? My goal for you guys is that like the SLT is just the start of the conversation, okay? This is not the end of the conversation. This conversation may continue not with MedLife. It may continue with MedLife. It may continue with another nonprofit. How many of you have done an SLT style trip before? How many of you done? One. Okay. One. Okay. So like 1, 2, maybe you do a third. I don't know. It just sort of depends on you, where you're at, where you're learning, right? If you're getting to like 5 or 6, you're probably moving into like, hey, it's time for an internship. Like, let's do like a month, let's do 3 months, let's do 6, let's do a year, right? If you're at that point, maybe it's time to start thinking about doing some research, right? If you're at that point, maybe it's time to do a year employed somewhere, right? That is the arc that we want to help you guys on, right? So we don't want you to think about the SLT as like a thing that you came down and pretended to be a doctor to provide care to people. We have clarity on this. What we provide you really, truly, is education, right? You pay for that. You pay for that with sweat and heat and carrying cement, right? You pay that with money, but you pay like physically. I will tell you, after 20 years, I think that is the only way that is ethical to pay for that for the community. Does that make sense? We could do this. I did this with McGill University and Trent University in Ecuador and Panama. I paid the university to have educational experiences. They walked us through places like Pamplona. We did not provide care. We did not build houses. We did not build staircases. We did not provide care to patients. We walked through. I don't think that's the right way to do it. And not even just global health, right? If you're gonna go home and you know where you wanna work, North Dakota, West Virginia, south side of Chicago, wherever you're gonna work, I don't think the way you do this work is by walking through communities and just looking at people and talking about them, right? You meet them where they're at and you provide services, and through that, you start to really understand where they're at and how to actually be effective. Does that make sense? If you had walked through the reality tour and then pieced out, would you have understood the community as well as you do now after carrying cement, after doing dentist stuff, after working with doctors, after doing the things that you did to provide service? Did the service educate you? Okay. That's really important, right? I think this education doesn't come from just money, time, and books. It doesn't come from Netflix and lectures. It comes through service. Serving people is education, right? We have an idea of what people need. After this week, you have a much better idea of what they need, right? And it's through engaging with that muscle over and over and over again for months and years that all of a sudden you get really good at this work. Does that make sense? And do you think that there's a chance in the next 20 years, if you continue to engage with that over and over and over again, that you will be able to close that gap that we talked about a little bit earlier? Just a little bit. I'm not saying we're gonna eradicate that gap, but can we close it a little bit? And this is how we do that, okay? In my vision of this, we don't sit and talk about cultural competency for 45 minutes in med school and think we close the gap. The reality too is that we don't close the gap by doing a 7-day trip and then calling it good. It's about repeated exposure, right? It's about prolonged exposure over time and getting really good at doing this work. Does that make sense to you? That's what we believe. That's really what I would say pushes us to try and provide really good care for people, is that we believe that it can be done, right? We believe that you can learn how to do it. It's not magic, right? There's nothing magical about me. I grew up in Bangor, Maine, not sexy, right? And I'm doing this work at a decent level, right? Like this is my, for a lack of better terms, right? This is my community, right? Where you guys are. This is my clinic. right? If you guys think about you guys having a clinic in whatever place you're gonna work, this is Nick Ellis's clinic, right? So if I can do it, you can do it, okay? Okay, so we're gonna turn this around on you real quick and get you to kind of think hard, right? Like why almost everybody except economics and dentistry and somebody else, I think, right? What one still for you guys, like why are you here? And I don't just mean Lima, Peru and MedLife. Like why are you here? Why are you doing this? You could be in Paris this week. Let me rephrase this question. Why healthcare? Why this life? You have clarity on that? I can tell you it almost for sure has something to do with like your family, your where you grew up, your parents, something around that has to do with why you're sitting in this seat right now, right? Some exposure as a kid, didn't seem like just like life was fair, something like that. There's some why deep inside you that you're just like, I would go through whatever for this, right? And again, if there's not, I'd encourage you got to figure it out, right? Because this stuff is tough. Like if you're kind of going through this and you're a pre-med and you're like, wow, this kind of sucks. Like, I don't know if I actually want to do this. It's because you don't have the why, right? Like you're not totally clear on that. And if you're not, that's fine, it's okay. Like you're still young and figuring this out, but I would encourage you to like engage and figure it out, right? Because you're coming into some harder times beyond where you're at now. And the way to get through those times, and as I said before, the way to get into med school, PA school, whatever, is having clarity about that why, right? Mine has to do with my family, right? And it has to do with providing care to low-income people. And as I got older, I got good at Spanish, right? I got good at Latin America. I got good at international development, right? And I started to combine these worlds, and all of a sudden I got passionate about it, and I moved here in 2016 and built this, right? Trust me, this is tough. You know what I mean? Go through COVID. This was tough. It's tough to keep this thing alive, right? So who else, like, if you have thought about this, like, why this? Why this life? Why this career?
I feel like, my personal opinion, I want to give help because God willing, when I get older, I want to receive the same help because I feel like it's better to give than to receive.
Yeah. So it's like a value-based thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we're all gonna need help when we get older. It's just a not phase. It's just a cycle.
Absolutely. And so basically, a family thing, psychiatry, stigma, trying to improve that situation. So let's just kind of, and then if anybody else has it as you come, let's kind of go through that. So I think that the way that I recommend and I would encourage you to think about the next few years of your life, right, is you figure this out. The who you want to serve and why. And that why, the more specific that it can be, the more powerful it is, right? If it is as specific as I want to help people, is not, it needs to be refined. Keep going, keep engaging, keep doing stuff like this until you can figure out something that's tangible and kind of like you can really hold on to, right? It doesn't have to be as specific as like psychiatry. Mine was not that, right? Mine was like much more broad. Again, it was like international development. I did not have any idea that I was going to be a doctor even until my last semester, right? It wasn't that specific, right? I think the next step of this is gaining soft skills to provide this kind of care. So does anybody want to do work in Latin America? Nope. Anybody want to do work in another part of the world? Yeah.
Jamaica.
Jamaica. You speak English. Any other, I'm kind of going at language right now.
Okay.
Asia, cool. So like if you want to work in Asia, you got to speak the language, right? Like unless you're going to do just sort of like the medical mission, like 1 week type thing and then like peace out. If you really like, if we're talking like serious change, you got to begin to get that. And those are, I mean, depends on how you look at that. I look at that as a soft skill in the sense that it's a skill that you're going to gain over time. You're not necessarily going to go to like med school to get the language, right? But if you're going to be effective, it's going to be really important, right? And things like that, how you listen to people, how you see their body language, how they react, noticing the kid in the dental chair, all that kind of soft skill. It is not something that you just get overnight, right? It's something that you work really hard to refine over time. And then you get these hard skills, which are NP school, PA school, med school, whatever, PhD, dental school, right? And you combine those things to be effective in helping people. Does that make sense? Yep. Can we keep going? So this is kind of coming back to this idea that like, for us, this is how you gain these skills, right? It's having these conversations. How many of you guys feel like this kind of conversation, this kind of experience you've had in school? But it's kind of different, right? Like it's like a professor just kind of talking to you. Field education to me is about like being in a community. It's about providing care, it's about service, right? And really having this conversation in a way that is a much more deep conversation than being lectured at for 45 minutes about what cultural competency is. Does that make sense? I think when you get lectured for 45 minutes about cultural competency, like you walk out and you're like, okay, I don't really know how to do that better. If you do this week and you go home and you think about it, and then you do another week, and then you do a semester, and then you do a year, and then, right? That cumulative gaining of experience over time is how you do this kind of work really well. Does that make sense? Cool. And so kind of the way, our hope, right, for MEDLIFE chapters, one e-board person. So e-board is just like your leadership on campus. Like that's how MEDLIFE Forward functions, right? Our goal is, and nobody else is? That surprises me. Yes, okay. Look at this hiding hands. Okay, where are you guys at? Are you all at the same school? You're at Stony Brook, cool. Cool, nice. I almost ran at Stony Brook. So I think, you know, what is the purpose? I'm going to pick on the three of you guys. Like, what is the purpose of like your chapter? So my hope for a chapter, right? If you want to be a psychiatrist, you should be shadowing psychiatrists, right? If you want to be doing research, you should be doing research in psychiatry. If you know you want to provide psychiatric care, you talked about stigma in certain populations, Latin populations, Native American populations. Maybe it's not specific to a population, it's just psychiatry or certain areas of psychiatry. You need to go do that, right? And if you do that over time, this is the mistake that I think a lot of like pre-meds and anybody that's trying to get into school, you have this list of all this stuff you gotta do. You gotta do volunteering and research and blah, 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 blah. I studied like Drosophila hearts for like a semester, and that was a complete waste of my time, and I never used it again. It would have been much more useful for me to do research in global health. Right? And over time, like that's basically what I did is I created this arc over 4 or 5, I did a post-bac, so like let's say 6 years, right? An arc that became very clear that like when I went to Dartmouth, I was the global health guy at Dartmouth for my class, right? Like it was very clear what Nick Ellis was gonna do. Nobody would be surprised 20 years later, I'm just here talking to you guys from Lima, Peru. Like it had become very clear. That I did not get into med school because of my MCAT score. I will tell you that right now, okay? The real way you get in, do you have to have good grades? Sure. Yes. Do you have to have okay MCAT? Yes. Like you got to get the minimum bar. But if you hit that bar, do you think the kid that says, I'm going to be a global health guy in Latin America because I've done all this stuff, or the kid that says, I want to help people gets in? Right? And so to me, the real value of a MEDLIFE chapter is trying to get people to think like this and start creating things on campus that provide that structure. So if you have a freshman that comes to you and says, hey, I'm really passionate about whatever. I grew up in Houston and there's a lot of trauma there and gunshot wounds, and I think I want to be a trauma surgeon or maybe an ER doctor. Your chapter is there to help guide them on how to do that. So McGill University years ago ran their chapter they had tutors on how to do well in organic chemistry, tutors how to do well in biology and all this stuff, right? They basically created a chapter to help people get into med school and become successful, right? Could you have a group or a subcommittee on campus that says, what is your why? We're gonna develop that for each of you if you don't know now. We're gonna help you get the appropriate research for that why. We're gonna help you get the appropriate shadowing. We're gonna do volunteering experience that are relevant to that. And after 4 years, you are gonna be a little mini expert in how to do psychiatry for Native American populations in New Mexico, whatever. Do you think you get into med school that way? Yes. Do you think you make a difference to that community that way? Yes. Do we close the gap this way? Yes. What we don't close the gap, we don't provide better care by being like, I'm gonna do all this random stuff just to get in, and then you pop out when you're 32 and you're like, I'm so burnt out, I just need to buy a Mercedes and like go to the suburbs because I just can't deal, which is real, right? Like trying to get clarity around these things now and setting things up in a way that sets you on that arc, that's my goal for you guys. Does that make sense? Does it feel like that's what it is today? Yeah, and it's okay.
Not yet.
Yeah, yeah. Would it provide value to the students on campus? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, guys, any questions about any of that stuff? That's our hope for you, right? I know probably it's a little bit of a brain twist because most of us, when we do this sort of thing, we're really focused on the community and like, I'm here to provide care for the community. And we're very quickly sort of flipping that on its head and be like, the other side of that coin is educating you, what you can take away from this and helping you figuring out like a path over the next 2 or 3 years, right? Does that make sense? Does anybody have a sense of that? Like, how that might change for you, like to get into med school, NP school, PA school? Do you have any sense of how that arc over the next couple of years might change? Or is everybody just like, I need an internship this summer? I don't have an internship. Like, I think something that I took for many years was I felt like I took away more than I gave. Does anybody feel like that this week, that you've been changed or you've learned more than you even gave? And so then how do you make that equal, right? How do you give back in the long term? It's through gaining these skills, and then on the other side, you have the skills to give back. So maybe right now, even though you're paying money and you're here and you're carrying cement and like it's hot and it's hard and all this stuff, wouldn't it be crazy? And I think this is a little bit the truth, is that like you're taking away more than you're giving. You're changing, you're learning, right? You're learning how to be effective. And that's super important. Like if you want to do this work really well in the future, it's really, really important, right? And for us who want you to go home and serve in an underserved community, whether that's in the States or Canada or Peru, right? We want to help you do that. And this is how we've done it. Make sense? So that's more or less what we were here to talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions. MedLife, how to get into med school, whatever. How are we doing in terms of dinner time? Are we supposed to eat at 6? I can't see anybody over here.
4 to 6.
5 minutes. Yes. We do. We work in Tanzania. So, I mean, we is me for a lot of MedLife. So I've done a little bit of work in Tanzania. I'm good at Latin America. I mean, I speak Spanish. My we are a very like Spanglish family at home. My boys are bilingual. Like, I mean, in terms of skill sets, this is my skill set. And to be honest, I have an interest in providing care to other folks in communities and areas in the context of helping you guys do that and kind of broadening out our approach. But me personally, this is what I'm good at, you know? I mean, this is also why I work in Houston. I speak Spanish all the time on my shifts. So can we get some feedback? Thoughts on the week? Has it been a good week? Hard week? Easy week? Challenge you in ways that you didn't think or you did? Was it valuable? Yes? No? Yes? And in what ways was it valuable in ways that we haven't talked about? I'm sure it's clear to you, but like we could very easily work with American doctors. We do sometimes. There are American doctors that will come down and work with us sometimes, but we always have local doctors, right? Always, even if we have American docs, right? They speak the language, they understand the culture, and if there's somebody that has a heart murmur or whatever, and they need the care, they know how to refer that patient to the right place, right? Like the kind of care, the quality of care we can provide changed overnight when we made that switch. And we didn't start with local doctors, right? We didn't have that insight 20, whatever number years ago now.
And that patients will be prescribed medication, and then you'll ask them, oh, are you taking any medications? And they're like, yeah, but it's a small white brown pill, but I don't know the name of it. So it's like, regardless of the area, there's not a lot of education on like maintenance of your healthcare after you see a doctor or PA or nurse or whoever.
Yeah, so like healthcare literacy. Yeah, it's really important. And like, you know, you think about that in this context, right? In terms of average grade that people are studying compared to the States, right? You add in things like language in the States, New York and New York, I mean, God, like 100 and whatever number of languages that are spoken in one city, right? And how does like a provider make sure that a patient understands which white pill to take at 8 p.m. versus, 12, right?
Not even just like a language barrier, but just a general understanding.
Sure.
You go to school and you get an education and you understand
Yeah.
the diagnosis,
Yeah.
medications, and then it's your job to relate that to the patient. However, there's a disconnect.
Yeah. So I mean, like if that, in the same way as like psychiatry, right? If like healthcare literacy is something that is of interest to you, you could easily do research, you could easily publish, you could easily shadow people, you could easily basically create a career out of healthcare literacy, and like you could literally do that for the next 40 years and be like an expert in that, if that's something that's interesting to you. Yeah.
So it's a question, but
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say. So I know that my classmate and I, we go to the same school. We had a patient and she had lost her daughter, and she was basically explaining to the doctor that sometimes she feels like she wants to kill herself.
Yep.
So I know that here that you have levels 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sure.
Correct?
Yeah.
So I felt like that could be an emergency situation,
Sure.
but with the process we was going through, all the doctor can do was just give her some medication
Yep.
and just refer her to the doctor.
Sure.
But in the United States, if you say you want to kill yourself,
Yeah.
that's a straight emergency situation.
Sure.
So when in fact you guys skip the levels and make it an emergency situation, like I felt like in that moment when she said she felt like she wanted to kill herself,
Yeah.
all that shouldn't. Sorry, everything that level 1 through 4.
She should go to the ER
She
basically.
should go straight to the ER.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, why don't you guys do that in
Yep.
healthcare when somebody says they want to kill themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically in that scenario, it's very dependent on what the physician understands as like true intent with plan versus like feeling depressed and like I want to just not be here anymore, right? And I deal with that a lot in the emergency room. Here, healthcare is not, mental health care is not what it is in the United States either. So like the availability, and I know in the United States it's not great, but here it's worse. And I would suspect that it's a combination of those two things, is that the provider probably felt like the intent in that moment wasn't there so much as like a passive thing. And then
She had lost her daughter last year.
Yeah.
So she was really going through it.
Sure.
She couldn't even take care of her other kids. So
Yeah.
I felt like it was an emergency situation
Sure.
in that time. So then I have another question.
Mhm.
When do you guys skip the levels and then send them straight to the emergency?
It totally depends on the physician. So like if the physician feels like it's an emergency, that's when it happens. So we do have cases like, a little baby with severe pneumonia, that's not breathing well, they're gonna be put in a pickup truck and they're going to the emergency room right away.
So it will be ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. That's the most important.
I don't know that I would make it that basic, from a like, they're gonna die right now perspective.
No.
But anything that is like emergent and the physician feels like this can't go, so like, appendicitis, they're not necessarily gonna die today, but it needs to be treated today. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So it's basically a physician call.
So somebody saying they want to kill themselves is not an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to you about this afterwards. I will tell you that I deal with this a lot in the emergency room in Texas. And just because somebody says that doesn't mean that they're gonna be like put into a psychiatric ward. I think the reality too is like, you're probably more likely to make it to the end if you do that. So like if you do the path that like you think you have to do, that you've been sort of put on and that someone laid out for you, the likelihood that you're successful there is probably not as good as what we just described, right? Like if you can truly figure out like what really motivates you, align your research, your volunteering, your shadowing, and all of that, and then create this story of like, the real reason that I'm here applying today is because of this. And like, guess what? If you don't accept me today, like I am on this path and this is what's going to happen in my life, right? So like if I didn't get into med school, I would be doing something like this because I had that clarity. Does that make sense? And when you do, I think the reality is you don't get into med school the first time, you apply again, you do get it. Like you get that kind of clarity and that arc, and like nothing's gonna stop you. It may take a turn in a way that you didn't anticipate, and you may not go the way you thought, but you make it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Great. So I think we're 5 minutes over, so we should wrap. Thank you guys for this week. And for as much as I've said, like, you know, you didn't provide care, like, you do care. And that is why we're here. And so without you being here and willing to carry cement and sit beside doctors and organize things on campus and hand out flyers and do the fundraisers and all that stuff, like, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So thank you 10,000 times, a million times over for everything that you've done for us.